Lindsay Anform, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, no, thank you so much for joining us. We are super excited to talk to you. I got to tell you, like, when I watched Criminal Minds, and the episode was just outstanding. It was very intense, and your performance was just phenomenal. The whole time I'm like, where have I seen this woman? This woman is like, I know I have seen her, like, and it was racking me. And then I realized, wait a minute. Kings of Leon. Like, I know that, right? That's like the first place I had ever seen you. And I'm like, I was just like going through everywhere trying to figure out where I had seen you from. And then I was just like, oh, and she's been in this and this and this. So super pumped. But that performance alone made me like, wow, we have to interview her. She was just incredible on that show. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us, because we're super excited about it. How we kind of like to start out, though, is kind of like just an introduction for everybody that might not be familiar with you. How did you get started in the industry? Was it something you saw yourself always wanting to do, was being an actress, or did you kind of fall into it, or what was the path?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question for me, because so I'm from not just South Dakota, which I always tell people just south of North Dakota.
Yeah.
I'm from the reservation
Yeah.
of the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, and so it's just a very remote. I grew up in a very remote area. We had 3 channels. We were very excited to get John Wayne movie rented from the nearest. Rental video, back when you rented videos.
Right.
And so I didn't really understand that acting was a job until I was I think I was like 8. And weirdly enough, we had a TNT movie, Crazy Horse, come, and there's a couple places in South Dakota that some shows have been, or movies have been shot on. And there was something with the budget or something, that they were asking people if they would allow someone to film on their ranch. Mm-hmm. And so my dad, he said, sure. And so they came all the way out. And I mean, this is like, it's like the nearest town is probably an hour drive. And like 45 minutes of that is gravel. So like, we're out in the boonies. I don't think they good. But they brought all their, the actors in tents, and they had just big, giant tents for people to, for the catering and for the food and everything. And we would go there. It was during the summer, so we weren't in school, and we would go there and we would just watch them, film. And you always had to be at a very long distance.
For sure.
And, but I couldn't, I was like, wow, this is like a career. Like, these are people, staying in those tents in this, place in South Dakota. And crazy enough, there was a second movie. So that was TNT, that was Crazy Horse. And then a second movie came on a couple of years later, Hidalgo, Disney's Hidalgo.
Yeah.
And same thing. I just had that real, it's like excitement and the lights and and all of a sudden I just wasn't on, this ranch in South Dakota anymore. It was really fun. And so later on, I don't know if you saw that I did this film called On Sacred Grounds.
Yes.
And
yeah, we definitely want to talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Irene Bedard actually was the lead actor on Crazy Horse, which was filmed there. And then David Midthunder, he had a part in Hidalgo in Disney. And so when I worked with them, I was just like, my mind was so blown, because it was just such a time where I was kind of finding myself as a person and what I wanted to do and what my voice was going to be. And then now I was actually working with them. So
that's crazy. That's a full circle moment right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite stories to tell, because it's just, when you're starting out, you don't realize what it's going to take to get there.
Right.
But when you're there, you don't realize what you've done. So, even when I've done tons of indie films, and whenever you're on location and people around, from that town or whatever are really excited, and you're kind of like, well, it's just an indie film, but it's kind of, you sometimes don't see how far you've come. So.
I
It's always
love that.
interesting.
Yeah, so that's a good perspective because we're filmmakers. Also, we just made our directorial debut, did a short film, and a little, and the community was exactly like that. Oh, and they're all like, "Oh, we're making movies." Kind of. You don't. Yeah, the excitement is something that even gets us more excited when you're doing it. It's like, oh, look at how much they love what we do, and it's very cool. But yeah, let's talk about On Sacred Ground. So you must have had like a unique perspective coming from that area, and then living on the reservation, and then the whole storyline. For anybody who's not familiar with it, it's about the pipeline that they were trying to do through the reservation. Talk about that. What was that experience like, having come from that background and dealing with that? What was that like?
Well, that was really cool. Anytime I can do a film that that is somewhat close to my past, or how I grew up, my foundation, it's always really special because you kind of get to have a voice that sometimes you don't have normally.
Right.
You also you can relate, and it's interesting what you forget as I said, as you're going through the motions of life, or you're go. But sometimes you forget, like how, for me, because there was a lot of Native American actors that were on set and stuff like that, and you forget how like hilarious that like Native American humor is. Like, it's just there, and like instantly you fall back into it, and it was just really, sometimes I had to remind myself like I wasn't back home, I was like working, just because it's very familiar, and it's just a really cool place to be, and especially when this had such a powerful message, and really bringing attention to a very important cause. So that was just a really cool project to be a part of.
Oh, for sure. It's a great time for, awareness for Native American heritage, because shows like Reservoir Dogs and different movies and, like I said, different shows are exposing the world to the heritage so people can, be more informed about it. I feel like we always say that the best form of education is through entertainment. I feel like, that's the way to teach everybody about what other people live like, or whatever other people think like. It's not necessarily to change your viewpoint, but it's to let you get a little insight on other people's life. And I feel like that is very important. And I feel like it is also very important because this podcast is for the up-and-comers trying to break into the entertainment industry, that they can see from your story that you can come from anywhere and everywhere and you can make your dreams happen. Did you go from South Dakota? Did you go to LA, or where was your relocation? Are you still there?
Yeah, so I went from South Dakota to Denver, Colorado for school.
Okay.
And that's when I really started acting. Like, actually, it was such a great place. It was small enough to get my feet wet, and that's where I was able to get into 2 union projects, so I was able to get my SAG card. And so that was just a really great, but actually everyone's always like, was it really crazy coming from South Dakota to LA?
Right.
And I'm like, actually, the crazy thing, from the biggest culture shock per se, was coming from South Dakota to Denver. Ooh. Like, just from this small town, kind of, I guess, small town living life, right, and to the city, where the biggest thing I could not get over was like paying for parking. I was just like, hey, like I couldn't make that make sense in my head. Like, for any reason, like, I'm going to the dentist. Why do I have to pay for parking?
That's what pays for that pavement instead of the gravel,
Right. For the amount of times I lost my car in the giant, parking structures.
Yeah.
Like, that was the biggest learning curve for me. Denver to LA, it wasn't like that crazy. It was like adjusting, like anytime you're moving to a new place, but right, it wasn't like so shocking as just these little things when I first moved to Denver. So I went there for school originally as an art major, and I actually ended up taking an acting class. And I just kind of had this feeling, and really I wasn't like a very, I wasn't like super outgoing, or a very, I guess, someone who needed all the attention or anything like that. I was just kind of drawn to acting as a means of, I liked this idea of having a script to say to people, and like that someone wrote it out, edited it, and then I just have to memorize it and say it, And so I I started doing some plays and taking these acting classes, and I really just started really enjoying it, and actually didn't go back to school the next semester, and I just did full-time acting. Started taking, like I said, classes. I got an agent, headshots, and really saw it as a business, and was able to, but also an art form, and did the short films, and went to, I was a part of Colorado Film School, and they would cast us from that, and had a really great agent who really encouraged us to, he did these like free workshops, and Denver was awesome. It was such a great place to get your feet wet. Big enough to actually be doing something, but small enough to where, your agent really cared for you, and was a voice for you, and you could talk to them, and just really fun people. And some of them are still in the industry today, So
Nice.
that's
For sure. And a couple of things to take away from that, because, I feel like sometimes making the move to a place like that, right, it's a very smart thing to do when you're first getting started, because you can be the proverbial big fish in a small pond, as opposed to just that one that looks like everybody else and there's 1,000 people just like you in a room trying to go for the same thing, right? To get your feet wet in an area where you have the opportunity to actually get roles and learn the skill. I think that's a really smart move for a lot of people that are trying to do it like yourself from somewhere other than the meccas, right, of New York, California. It's a smart move. The other thing I'm really curious is art. What form of art did you go for?
Well, I was basically just getting like my basics, but I took, so I didn't really know. I remember taking an art history. Actually, you know what? That's funny. I took an art history class, and this teacher, he was just like, he didn't really teach. He just like told us to go places. So he'd be like, okay, this week you have to go to this, or this, and so he really encouraged me to find like what, go to the art museum, go to these shows that were happening. And then one time he said, you have these 4 movies, go watch them. And so me and one of my friends were like, okay, we're going to go this weekend. It was like raining or something. And we get to the movie theater, and there was 2 movies. I can't remember what the other one was, but that was the one that we were going to go watch. And it was sold out or something. I can't remember. And so we went to the Hours.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, with Nicole Kidman.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Meryl Streep. And so I went to that, and I was blown away. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, Nicole Kidman just blew me away. Meryl Streep. Who else was it? What's her name? I love her. She was in Magnolia.
Oh, yeah. Hold on, it'll come.
Right.
I know.
We'll consult the Bible real quick while you're. Yeah, we'll pull it up.
I'm like, Julianne Moore.
There
Oh my
you
gosh.
go, Julianne Moore. Yeah, and so,
Um,
well, the reason I brought that up is because you were. I was curious if it had any. You were in a short where you played an artist, a painter, right, with autism. What a role that must have been, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The range that you have is incredible. I mean, the roles that we've seen you take on, it's all over the map with the type of characters that you've played. Was it challenging to play somebody with autism and to come at that with that role?
I love you asking these questions, because these are a lot of projects that were, they like a total of 50 people saw them or something.
Right.
We do our research.
Yeah, you do. Thank you.
Sure.
That was a really cool role. I loved that. I went to so I'm a member of the Actors Studio.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really studying a lot at that time. And so, their whole thing is very much to like get as much research as you can, really try and see, just explore as much as you can to find your character. And so I went to a lot of like these kind of events for autistic people, and or people who have autism. And I talked with people. I read this book. I'm a big reader. That always helps me. About the woman who, she like found out how to get cattle to to like go through certain so that they weren't so scared, but they would go through
Yeah.
certain like alleys when they're being loaded or something like that. So and there was this dancer that I read about, and so just like I would go to these events, and the people that were running it knew like why I was there and stuff, and they were totally cool with it. And I would take notes and I would converse with these people, and so just kind of trying to get. I feel like with acting, there's always a couple of, when I take on a character, I look for where somebody holds their tension. So sometimes it's in your hands, sometimes it's in your jaw, sometimes it's it can be. So I always kind of try and see where somebody's like holding their tension, and then just like the little tics that somebody might have, or and what I found was with autism, it seems like they're just, it's almost like they're so concentrated on something that's why they kind of have that almost like delayed reaction, or they're kind of unable to respond to people in a way that we might. And so I found that if I really if I just kind of put myself in a constant like where I'm being very, very focused, I could kind of tap into maybe what it would feel like, or to move, or react as someone with autism.
Most definitely. My nephew is actually autistic, and his mother likes to kind of think about it like tunnel vision. They just have they get focused on one thing, and that's what we have to, focus on and entertain and try to get through type of situation. So I feel like it's a special thing, and there's such a stigma behind it because people feel like somebody with autism can get left behind, but matter of fact, there's people with autism who excel so much more than the average person does. So I think it's just a different way of thinking. It's in a different type of lifestyle. So I was just so happy and thrilled to see you do that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
For sure.
No, that's really cool. This dancer that I was telling you about, because a lot of times they, from what I've read, is that they don't know how to respond to, you'll say something and they just don't know. And I mean, we all kind of have that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I am someone who, when I concentrate on something, I already do kind of have that tunnel vision. And so it's a matter of like amping that up a little more. But when I was doing the research, I read this book about this dancer, and he was obsessed with, because I think they get really focused on like one thing, and he was obsessed with how people walked and where they're, like if you walk and your weight is more towards your back, it kind of gives you a little swag.
Right.
But if you're like someone who's on your toes, you're kind of moving, you kind of are someone who like is moving forward all the times. And if you're in the middle, you usually have kind of what he called like this, like a swing, and it was kind of something in between. And that was really fascinating to me. And I continue to use that to help develop my characters to today. So that just took somebody else with a little different viewpoint,
Exactly.
To put that down and observe that.
Well, that's really interesting to hear how you approach things like that. And like Logan said, I'm glad that you did a film like that, and that there are films like that to kind of put out there, hey, there's this misconception about all these things, right? But this is the reality, and let's tell a beautiful story in a way that people can learn from. So that was outstanding. And this is a good transition into some of the characters that you've played, because mental health is so important these days, right? Another thing with a stigma attached, and nobody wants to talk about it. And you've played some pretty intense roles and in characters in situations that were pretty intense. Nurse Ratched. I mean, you were in Ratched.
Yeah.
Let's
talk about a tense set.
Can we get any more? And then the recent episode of Criminal Minds and being kidnapped and the way that character was dealt with in that episode. Talk about your approach for characters like that. And do you have a way that you separate from that? Like, that's an intense day of work. How do you step back away from that and stay okay in your own mental state of, dealing with, because this is already an industry that's built on, we like to call selection instead of rejection, right? But it is. There's far more no's than yeses, and it's a tough industry. You have to be strong mentally. So when you get into playing roles like that, and it's just a 13-hour day of nothing but intense, how do you separate from that, the anxiety, and deal with your mental health in those type characters?
Number one, family. Number one, family.
There you go.
And a strong foundation of who you are. That's very, very important. For me, however, even that, like, because sometimes, like Criminal Minds, it does. The thing is like your brain knows this is fake, but your body thinks you're going through something
Right.
over and over and over. And what you're, it's like when something very tragic happens to somebody and they stop crying, like they just can't cry anymore. Like eventually your body stops. It's like, I can't do this anymore. And this is the way that you get through those kinds of events in life. And so as an actor, though, it is a little tricky because you have to learn to kind of communicate to your body, as weird as that sounds. So I was actually kind of dealing with some things where I just kept getting like really, really sick, and I couldn't like get over it. And I started working with a coach from the actor studio who introduced me to, it's called Sensory. And sensory it's not what people think it is. A lot of people think that you like go into your imagination and you I don't know, find it and do whatever with this imagination. But what it really is about is relaxation. So it's kind of like a very artistic meditation, maybe. So you're kind of teaching your body to just relax before. It's kind of like warming up before you do like play basketball or something.
Right.
It's kind of like, okay, we're getting ready. So your body kind of gets used to, and I can tell when I'm not doing this. And sometimes I'm a little lazy, like with an audition or something like that, warming up. But I always try to warm down, because when you are, in those states of emotion and your heart is beating and you really, it's so important to just like take a couple minutes and really wind down, because your body, you have to tell your body that this is over. We're stopping. We're okay. We're going to go sleep tonight, because it can mess with you. It can mess with your sleep. It can mess with your, just your overall health. And I think it's really important to understand if it's not sensory, then maybe some sort of yoga or meditation to kind of prepare yourself, and also to wind down.
Yeah, something to bring down that adrenaline. It's very important because, like you were talking about, the body and the mind aren't necessarily always on the same wavelengths. And they can like kind of miscommunicate with each other. And we're like, okay, guys, can we just all be okay? Like, can we just like chill the fuck out?
Right. Exactly.
But it's been very fun talking about that, because we actually got so deep into mental health that we started our another podcast about mental health, where we just talk about different subjects of it, to where we can just have that free-flowing conversation, just telling our experiences. And it's kind of like free therapy for us to get that all out there, and to be able to let other people know, the listeners know, that hey, if something similar like this happened to you, you are not alone.
Yeah.
So I think that is very important.
And you might have just inspired
another
upcoming episode,
Yeah.
because I feel like we don't talk enough about the physical aspect of mental health, right? You always think here, but the body plays an important role in your mental health. So I'm thrilled that you brought that up. That wasn't even on my thought process.
It wasn't mine either.
Now we're going to have to give you credit if we come forward with that episode. We're like, no, you should be a guest on that episode. That's fantastic.
For sure.
So I love that though, that your process and how that goes about. Do you have a particular type role that you absolutely gravitate towards, or even on the opposite side of that, do you have a role where you're like, no way, I'm never going to play that. That's just not my wheelhouse. Do you try to stay away from anything, or do you try to be like, every time this one comes up, I'm going for it?
Well, I would say like, I really enjoy any kind of character. I really love period pieces. Like I definitely I mean I love the hair and the makeup.
Yeah.
And everything like that. Like I love doing those kind of things. I will always say yes to a period piece. And in terms of anything that I would say no to, I mean, yeah, there's definitely things I would say no to, but like in terms of character, I can't. I'm always fascinated with people. Like it would have to be just either a really flat character or a really one-dimensional character for me to say no, because I'm always really interested in what makes people tick. You know, what makes them make the decisions they made. What's their decisions they wish they would have made. And I like that's just something that I've always been absolutely fascinated with. And so I can't think of off the top of my head anything that I would be like, no. I'm interested in a lot of things. And I think that's so important as an actor to really be interested in things.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and you never know, like sometimes I'll just start studying something. Um, like I was really into, I don't know if you guys have seen these on the and of course like the internet doesn't help sometimes because you get on like the YouTube
For sure.
Yeah.
stops. But there was like these like 1950s footage of patients, like mentally unstable people, that they were like with no consent, there's no consent from these patients. They
Oh,
were just
wow.
like vaping them because they could back then.
Right.
And it was just really interesting because just to see that things change and they don't change. Like people change, our clothes change, what we wear, what we spend our time doing and all this stuff. But like you were saying, like mental health is something that has always been around. We've found ways to, you know, medicine and ways to like help it and stuff. But there's always been people that have battled with that. And so I was like just watching these, like very, very fascinated for a while. And then I just did a role with a woman who is has bipolar. And then I knew exactly where, and she was from the 50s. So then I like knew exactly where to start researching, you know, and so I always think just, it's really funny how many times I've just started doing something, researching something because I thought it was interesting. And then and a couple of years later, I actually can use it I'm just like that much more ahead in my research for a project. So
That falls great because you know we had a previous guest on too, Autumn Reeser, who had a quote that said, you know, don't try to be interesting, be interested, right? And I feel like as an actor, that's great because the more people watching you do, the more learning about how people do what they do and why they do it makes you a better performer for sure, because that's more to draw from. So I love that you brought that up. I feel like a lot more people are doing that and we don't hear enough about that's the approach. Like, how can you be a good actor performing if you don't know why people do what they do, right? Like, how can you bring that? So that's great. Love that.
yeah, I would say definitely as an actor, you have to be totally fascinated with the humans and not just one side of human, but all human. Like you really have to be just, and I am, and I think the best actors really are. There's just this really deep fascination of humans.
For sure. And I'm very curious too. I mean, this is kind of like one question, but it's wrapped into like three. There's you're such like an intelligent human being, and you study just how people use their mannerisms in certain ways and like what makes them tick. So like three things. Have you thought about writing a book about acting? Have you thought about teaching acting? And have you thought about stepping behind the camera? Because I feel like you would make a great director in the sense of, you know, what makes people tick and like helping people out, get inside their heads and things like that.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, I haven't really thought about writing a book or teaching acting. I really do feel like that is its own kind of specialty. And the teachers and coaches that I've had, they just have it's just kind of a different thing that they're doing. They're kind of looking at everybody and how to reach all of them, how they can pull something out. Whereas I'm looking very much at like myself
Right.
and how I can take in characters and kind of, you know, regurgitate them into something. And so not so much those. Directing, I'm not so sure about directing if I'd really be interested with directing, but I am very interested in writing. I do write, and and I've always wrote, so that like a big journaler, and then always and in the last like probably 5 or 6 years I've been taking, like, and really going and writing scripts and trying to explore that kind of avenue of creativity. So and it's really fascinating to me. Again, it's really trying to understand a world, trying to understand what makes these characters tick. It was a little overwhelming for me at first because I'm very used to looking at the one thing,
Right.
and being very tuned in with that one thing, where writing is about looking at everybody in this world that you're creating, in the arc, and
Oh yeah.
and so sometimes it's hard for me to step big picture, just because naturally I gravitate to being very focused.
Yeah, exactly. Right now we are writing a television show that's loosely based on us, and so I find myself, thinking about the character that is based on myself so much, but then I'm like, whoa, I got to think about his friends, I got to think about the love interest, like all of these things. So it's like it's like beautifully overwhelming in a sense, to where you're like, I'm literally creating a world, and right now we're sending out sides for self tapes, and we're getting those back, and it's amazing to see, that world come to life in the sense to where like this came out of my head, and now like I see the character in real life, like saying the words I wrote. I mean, it's such a beautiful experience.
It is crazy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think it's, as an actor, I've always to me it's like a partnership with the writer. When you get a script, it's like I always want to see, like, what is he either consciously or unconsciously trying to say or get across, or so you get, I'm always like, first step, I want to get in step with this writer. I want to, like, what's the themes he's trying to explore, and is there anything that I can add to these themes by just a gesture or a prop or what, or clothing or whatever. And so I've always kind of felt like you're almost like an editor or something after you receive this piece of work, and then you kind of go through and try to find out what your job is, and what you can do to kind of add make those words even more interesting, or more real, I guess.
I love intelligent. I love that you said that, because your whole listening to this conversation, you can tell, as creative as you are and as artistic as you are, you have a very intellectual approach to your craft and how you do. I love that, because you don't normally, everybody's kind of like, well, I kind of do that, and it's all coming from an artistic kind of a way. You're very methodical and very intellectual about your approach and how you do it, and that's so unique, from at least from the people that we've talked to. That's a very unique approach, and it's very interesting to hear how you go at things. Yeah, that's really amazing. I have to ask, because I watched the film recently, your Western with Nicolas Cage. Yeah, The Old Way. Now, clearly you said you like period pieces, so I mean, it was a given that you were going to say yes to this one, right? What was that like? You guys shot that at Yellowstone Movie Ranch, right? So what was that whole experience like? And you got to give us some insight on Nick. I mean,
Right? What was that?
I mean, because Nick is Nick. You've got to have a story there, right?
Yeah, believe me, I was like, it was a little hard for me to even like comprehend. But I love Nick Cage. I've always loved his choices he makes. You know, he just always makes strong and interesting choices. And so I already was going in there as a huge fan of Nick Cage. Not intimidating at all. So that was a really cool script. It was a cool script. It was also like just a really cool project because, we were filming in Montana. So again, I just love anything that like has, and I grew up on like these kind of Westerns,
Right.
And just even, I was I don't know if you guys know the painter Harvey Dunn, but he used to do like prairie women, pioneer women. Mm-hmm. And so I've always found this genre, this type of woman fascinating. So I was just like in my element there. Shooting with Nick Cage was really pretty cool. And that's when you just have to go like trust yourself.
Right. Exactly.
And because you're just not really sure, and especially when a big star's on set, like not just how the star is going to react, but like how everyone else is going to react. So it's always kind of like walking on eggshells a little bit, but you get used to that in this job. How to walk smoothly. But yeah, so when I first met him, it was during COVID, like we were getting over COVID.
Yeah,
and stuff.
right.
And so he actually did that thing that he does in The Unbearable Weight of
Right.
Is he like this or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I go up to meet him, and that hadn't come out yet, but he was just like, he like does this like thing to me. So I was like, because usually you go to shake someone's hand, you're like, oh, okay, like maybe he's like a germ person or something, like, so I was just like, oh, okay, like, nice to meet you. And I go back and I get my corset tightened up and,
Right.
and all that. And we come back and we do a rehearsal, and, it's the part where she's like hanging the laundry and stuff like that. And in the script there says, there's this kiss. And I'm like, okay, well, we rehearse it. We don't kiss. There's no talk of the kiss. No one says about the kiss. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I get it. He's kind of probably concerned about the COVID thing. And I was cool with it too. It felt really natural. I didn't think it really needed the kiss or anything. It was just like really nice. We go back to our trailer, get touched up and everything like that. Come back to the set, and I go to my place where I'm supposed to go, Nick goes to his place, and all of a sudden Brett, the director, comes up to me. He's like, hey Kerry, don't forget to add that kiss in. Runs off, and I was like we didn't rehearse this. And I'm a big rehearser. I like to rehearse. I was like, wait. And then he's like, action, and I was just like, kiss Nick Cage, no big deal. Yeah, so that was my scene with Nick Cage.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. That's fantastic. I was going to ask you if you have an embarrassing moment from anything that you've worked on set or whatever, but that's a pretty good story right there. It's like, wait a minute.
I was just like, oh my goodness. But working with him was really great. There's kind of two, I think there's like two kinds of actors, and one, there's some actors who they just like, they're kind of always on.
Mm-hmm.
They can be like telling you a hilarious joke and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden be like the most dramatic person, like cry on tears and stuff. And I'm just like, how do you do that? I'm someone who has to like be preparing. Like I'm a preparer, and so I, and I think he's that way too, because he's not like super chatty or anything, but I'm like not super chatty either. So it kind of like, it was, it was nice.
Right. Well, fantastic. I love that though. And I mean, what was the scenery like? Because you hear all of this stuff about Montana and how like the elevation is like crazy and the mountains are beautiful. Like what
Have you guys been there?
No,
We have not.
No.
Where are you guys at actually?
Currently in North Carolina. So we were in LA when COVID started to go down, and we have relatives here who were having some medical problems, and then when everything shut down and the industry shut down, all of our people in LA are like, don't come back if you don't have to now. So we just kind of made the decision to kind of, okay, well, I guess we're going to stay here and be all right. So yeah, but no, never been to Montana. So
no, we like after being in Montana, both my husband and I were like, do we need to be in LA?
Exactly.
It's like, do we need to be there? Because everything for me, like audition wise, has gone virtual. And,
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Like this kind of stuff, So I definitely understand that. Montana was amazing. Like I was actually the first time I'd ever been there.
Yeah.
Even like South Dakota, I'd never been to Montana. I'd always heard about it. And I personally think South Dakota has an amazing sky, like the sunsets, and everything. But I was like, Montana, you're close. I don't know if I'm going to say, but you're close.
It's one of those things. I can't put you past the home state, but man.
I think both South Dakota and Montana are calling you right now for tourism commercials. They're like, yeah, you're real close. Yeah, that's just put that on the license plate. Montana, we're real close.
We're real close to South Dakota.
that's
my
the banner.
goodness.
So just quickly though, because you just talked about the whole virtual aspect and all that kind of stuff. So we have talked to a lot of people that during the whole COVID shutdown and all the kind of stuff transitioned heavily into voice work, right? And animation, because that was still possible. That was still able to get out there and get done during that whole trend. Did you find yourself doing, because I mean, we're huge Harley Quinn fans, and we noticed that you were on an episode of Harley Quinn, and that was pretty awesome. Are you doing more? Are you finding yourself doing more voiceover work or approaching more voiceover work? And how do you like that?
Yeah, I've been doing voiceover for a long. I've been auditioning for voiceover for a long time. So like voiceover auditioning, it's like 2-3 times as much as on camera stuff. So it's you are basically doing 1 or 2, actually more, probably like 3 or 4 a week at least.
Nice.
And so you're just constantly, working. I always like it because, one, it forces me to work on accents. It forces you to understand your voice and how it works and how to, manipulate it. So I always liked it just even as a training tool, so I always try to do that. I've done a couple other things, mocap stuff and, commercials and stuff like that. So I definitely think it's a great, it's something I'm always interested in. And yeah, it's awesome. You like go to the studio and just show up and whatever, and then you don't have to put makeup on or anything. You're just like, all right, here's my script. I don't even have to memorize anything.
Right.
So yeah, voiceover is awesome. And I'm always up for anything. I'm basically up for anything. I'm
Right.
like,
Just like this.
Yeah.
Well, I love that though. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show and getting a little crazy with us. We really appreciate it. And man, oh man, I mean, you're just such an amazing person. You are welcome back anytime. Anytime you have to promote anything, or if you just want to come on and shoot the shit, we are down for it.
That's right.
yeah, definitely. I'm down for it too. So let me know.
Yeah, I mean, we might seriously reach back out to you for the other podcast too, because that was a very interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to dive deep. You're so intellectual. I think we would enjoy diving deep into that subject with you about, because that's something we hadn't even thought about. So
Exactly.
fantastic.
Yeah. I'm always interested in that kind of stuff. So
Well,
anytime.
2 things to wrap up with. What do you have coming up? And social media, because it's all about social media now. Where can people find you? So what do you have coming up and where can people find you?
So coming up, I have a biopic on the Duck Dynasty family.
Oh,
That's cool.
Well, that sounds interesting already.
Yeah. So I play Phil's mother, who was she's the woman who had bipolar.
Yeah.
So that's just really cool. We were like, in the 50s in Louisiana and just, playing kind of his life story. So
For sure.
That's coming out. I think this fall.
Okay. All right.
And everything else is kind of out right now for me. Criminal Minds and
Right.
The Old Way, R.I.P.D 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes. So, and then, I'm in consideration for a couple other projects. So we'll see how that goes. And so, yeah, you can, find me on Kerry Knuppe, on, Instagram. I'm not really great with Twitter, but I am pretty good with my Instagram, and Facebook's kind of, Instagram's like the cool one.
It is for sure. Well, listen.
To me anyway. I don't know. Maybe it's not anymore. And I'm like, but yeah.
We'll get you over on TikTok. Don't worry. It's fine.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll be talking to you soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
All
You
right.
bet. Bye-bye.
Bye. Man, oh man. After all of these conversations, it's so great to talk to like-minded individuals.
Yes, and what I like too is that, doing it all these years, right? We get so many different approaches.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is the most unique approach that I've ever seen about how intellectually she breaks down what she does.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, I love talking to people who are like-minded, and then also we can learn from.
Yeah.
Right. Like that approach is learnable.
Yeah.
So,
and her approach is very physical. She's looking at all the movements, all the ticks, all of the different things that someone is doing with their body. And we haven't really discussed that aspect of it before. People are talking about like their facial expressions and like what they're thinking, but she's looking at, their movements. And I think that's very special.
well, and
something
a
to look
great
forward to.
example that she brought up with that was when she was doing the studying for the autism and about the dancer who paid attention to how people walked. And then when she was telling her story about Nick, she's like, no, and I was walking this way
Yeah.
on the set when they were, so she's taking what she's researching and learning and